welcome to the latest bonus episode of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the casual spike, focused on the latest decks, trends, strategies, and streamers in Modern and Pioneer. My name is Stan here in Chicago. With me, as usual, it's Dave Harburger.
Hey everybody, excited to talk about one drops with haste and one drops without haste on this episode.
Also, this week we have a very special guest. We're lucky to join our show. A man who probably needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. You may know him from Twitch, also a fixture on Star City Games. It's the one and only Ryan Overturf.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
it's
really
very
excited.
nice to chat with you.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking prowess, so I got a lot to say.
Well, I think it's interesting because Stan and I have both talked about the deck a lot, and certainly I've piloted it at a few events very badly, so I can't wait to talk to somebody who's actually good at playing it. And it's just a deck that for some reason has a warm spot in my heart.
Yeah, there's a little something for everybody. It's the kind of deck that the entry level is pretty low. I mean, anybody can cast a Lava Spike. You know, there's some finesse in the higher level play, but it's easy to get a foot in the door. There's something to master if you commit yourself to it. So it's a really fun deck. It's pretty accessible, but also there's things to level up with, which is cool.
All right, we'll try to get to level 13 today. Fun fact, we've never talked to Ryan. Dave, I don't know about you. I've never talked to Ryan before.
No,
so
I don't leave my house, as you know, so yeah.
I should hope that people generally aren't right now anyway. So I think we're on the same page there.
We've definitely encouraged social distancing on our podcast, but this will be a fun experiment in creating a new friendship and relationship live on the air. But because we don't know you at all, I'd love to just take a couple minutes up top, ask you a couple quick questions about yourself, get to know you a little bit as a person beyond Magic the Gathering.
Well, most of what I do really is just different engagement with Magic. I stream, as you mentioned, commentary on the SCG Tour, and then I'm part owner of a board game cafe, which we also deal a lot in Magic, Lodestone Coffee and Games in Minnetonka, Minnesota. Though currently, a lot of this stuff is on hiatus. Mostly I'm just streaming now and passing the time.
Sure.
So when the store is open and we're not under quarantine, are you essentially making your entire living off like content and gaming?
I mean, gaming it's not, I think, the most accurate way to describe how the retail side of it works. I mean, it is still just retail. It's running a business, but it is the secondary market, like engagement with things that I care about beyond dollars and cents. I'm a person who has a lot of difficulty doing things like stocks because I just don't care much about money. I care about Magic, and Magic can make me money. So that's how I became, this involved with this many different elements of it.
What's the shop like?
Yeah, so we were one of the inaugural WPN premium stores, and what that requires is kind of a lot of polish. We're not like the kind of basement ambiance game store that maybe y'all came up in the 90s and the early 2000s. We're very much more the cafe kind of vibe.
I had one of those basement game stores, or my dad did, anyway.
I mean, I spent a lot of time in them. I'm not trying to pass too much judgment.
Totally.
Right on. I'm one of those people who, whenever I travel anywhere, even internationally, I try to stop into an LGS for like F&M or maybe a midweek Magic tournament. So when I'm in your neck of the woods, I'll show up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a good time. We try to have a pretty fun, welcoming atmosphere out there. We're a bit outside of the cities, but not too far. If you're through Minneapolis, it's not too far to get to us.
Awesome.
Right on. So how long have you been playing Magic?
I started playing Magic when I was in high school. In 2003, Legions was the new set at the time, which is a very good casual set.
Lots of creatures, right?
Just creatures, in fact.
Right. Yeah. I was on a bit of a hiatus during that block. That was right at the end of college for me. So I remember coming back later and being like, they made a set of all creatures? Mm-hmm. That is so weird.
It's still weird if you think about it in retrospect.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of up there with the set that they made. Was Torment the set that they made around the same time that was mostly black cards?
There was 2 sets in that block. So Odyssey had a normal distribution, and then Torment and Judgment. One was largely black cards, like more black cards than other colors, and the other one had more green and white than the other colors, if I recall correctly.
What an experiment.
Yeah, they've done some other weird ones since then, but not surprising we haven't double dipped on any of these.
Yeah.
What first got you into Magic?
Well, actually, maybe this is a little embarrassing for some, but I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Before I played Magic. Again, I was in high school and, middle school when I was getting into games, and I was always kind of into board games. I played a lot of Axis and Allies when I was a little younger than that, and I really always liked deep strategy. I was always down to hang around for 4 or 5 hours and battle with my friends, and Magic was the one that stuck. It was the one that I would always come back to even if I left.
I've never played Yu-Gi-Oh! I have played some other TCGs, including Pokemon, but how does that gateway work? Like, what was it about the similarities between Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic that got you from one into the other?
I think for like a lot of people, I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Through the anime. I watched Saturday morning cartoons, every Saturday morning, and that one had this game, and I was into different kind of games, and the collectible pieces and the personalities on the anime are like really in tune with their decks, so there's a lot of customization, which was cool. That was something that I never thought about until somebody else put it into words. People commonly say that Magic is like chess and poker, but a few years ago, Sam Black, I know that he said it's like chess, poker, and Legos. And actually the Lego customization is a big part of what makes Magic special to me.
I love that. I might throw in golf.
Sure.
Just because of the cost of playing.
As a commentator, I guess I can relate to that part too.
And also the polo shirts. All right, so something we like to do on these bonus episodes, especially when we interview people from the Magic community, is a little something that Dave coined called Inside the Grinder's Studio.
It's inspired by the questionnaire that James Lipton used to do at the beginning of Inside the Actor's Studio, basically. So just some general questions about Magic to try to get at the type of personality player you kind of are.
Sure.
Yeah, so these can be one-word responses. We'll probably ask 5 of these. There are wrong answers. All right, let's kick it off. What's your favorite Magic card?
Muldrifter.
Yes. Muldrifter is one of my favorite cards for sure as well, just from limited sense. Didn't really get to play with a lot in Constructed, although there definitely was a phase where I was trying to jam it into stuff like Grixis Twin and stuff like that at different points of time for fun. I remember the first time I kind of got to see someone do a Kolaghan's command loop with a Muldrifter, and I was like, this is wild stuff that I want to do, even if it's not that good. So great pick, I think, Ryan.
Hey, Muldrifter's unimpeachable.
Exactly.
I don't like people who don't like Muldrifter.
You're not going to find any doubters here.
I maintain a couple. Sorry, this is maybe long for the quick hits, but I maintain a couple cubes, and I make a point to only have the English version of cards. And when I had a Pauper cube, my Muldrifter was Japanese, and what I would say is I don't want a cube with anybody who doesn't know Muldrifter.
I think that's a reasonable expectation for people you play Magic with. No doubt. So what is your least favorite card? Chalice
of the Void. Not close to being close.
That's a good pick. I think that speaks to both of us.
It does, although recently on an episode I did say that I was thinking about buying into E-Tron because Chalice finally got a little bit cheaper in price, and I've also been kind of searching for a deck to play in Modern, but I'm going to avoid that for now. I definitely hate facing one down. Don't really love casting one. So
yeah, I think that's the thing, is it's one of those cards that's great when it's played against you, but casting it never feels good.
So follow up to that one, change it a little bit. What's your favorite format in Magic?
It fluctuates. I think right now it's just Pioneer for the sheer explorability.
Do you have a favorite moment from a game of Magic from your life?
It's got to be the Spell Pierce. I don't know if you know this story or if you've seen the clip, but it's round 1 of a Modern Open in Minneapolis a few years back. I'm playing against Ponza, and I'm playing Blue-Red Wizards, a short-lived Modern deck. And my opponent takes some time shuffling up for their 5th mana source off of Wooded Foothills, and they cast a game-ending Anger of the Gods, and I just flip a Spell Pierce face up from my hand, and they just put the Anger of the Gods in their graveyard.
Wow.
Was this on camera?
It was, yeah. It was like front page Reddit, and like Twitter just blew up. It was pretty surreal. I had a horrible tournament after the fact, but nobody remembers that part.
It's all about style points, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, this is my favorite one, maybe. Do you have a favorite piece of Magic slang?
Yeah, I generally don't like a lot of Magic slang, but I am partial to Mise. It's an older one, but it's just like such a perfect form of slang. Mise is short for might as well. And it's just like refusing to justify something. It's just very dismissive, and that's so perfect for an abbreviative slang term. I love it.
I remember when that showed up in the store that, like I said, the store that my family had at the late 90s. And I was like, number one, why is everybody saying this word suddenly? And even now, 25 years later, I'm still not really sure that I use that word correctly ever. It's hard to know. That definition is super helpful.
Yeah, a lot of the definitions for the older slang are lost to time. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to find them on old GeoCities message boards, and even then it's unintelligible.
Yeah, you have to find them on, like, old dojo articles.
And even then it's just like Mike Flores using them and expecting you to know what they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so there was a very specific reason we brought you here today. We want to talk to one of the people who we consider an expert in a deck that Dave and I have loved for a long time. And that's Mono Red Prowess. And to give you a little context on our history with this deck, Dave and I were both playing Is It Phoenix in its heyday in Modern. And then in like early January of last year, there was an SCG indie event. And I decided to play in the Modern Classic on Sunday. And this deck that like suddenly emerged the Friday before popped up, and Dave saw it do like turn 3 wins and maybe like go undefeated a couple times on Twitch, and I just decided to pick it up, basically no practice, play it, and I came in 33rd place, and I pretty much loved the deck ever since, though it was a very sad day when Faithless Looting got banned.
Yeah, it's interesting. We sort of started out as a Phoenix fan cast in some ways. Our first episode is about Is It Phoenix. It was around the same time that deck came out, and Stan and I have just been the holdouts for as long as possible playing that card. And then, like Stan said, when Faithless Looting was banned, we both shed a little tear and then kind of moved on from there as best as we could, trying different builds of prowess. And I felt like you were a person who I was like, this is a good player who is still playing this deck, and someone who really knew how to play Phoenix too. Like, one of the things that I remember, I mean, I've been watching you on coverage for years, but one thing that sticks out to me is the one time you played a Teamer Phoenix deck, I think, where you were splashing Traverse the Ulenwald, and I was like, this deck is so awesome. I can't wait to try it out.
That was the waning period of me thinking Arclight Phoenix Modern was cool. Mm-hmm. Because then we were still kind of pushing it and trying new things. Traverse was kind of a missing piece and added point of consistency for the deck, but meanwhile the format was actually just becoming inbred and horrible, where you would get surgical in game 1 like the week after that, and then it was all just like unplayable.
Yeah. That was kind of a sad moment. We definitely were holdouts who were like, it's fine. People will metagame around this. And then it just kind of kept going. We're like, wow, every deck really has Faithless Looting in it now. And then Hogat came and just blew everything up. And then, yeah, we know what happens from there. But I think that the first question that we had is, how have you kind of kept the faith, I guess, in this archetype as time has evolved and as it's become maybe arguably less powerful, but then also got better and more explosive in other ways? So what makes you keep coming back to this one?
Modern has been changing a lot, but it's kind of the more things change, the more things stay the same kind of way. I guess the thing that's changing right now is what the busted blue-green 1 card people are playing is. But, there's been new sets, cards banned, etc. But I still have the same parameters for what makes a Modern deck acceptable for me. It has to be able to close games on turn 3, either through dealing lethal damage or functionally being able to buy the turns that you need until the game actually ends. And you have to be able to be competitive on turn 8 through the decks that are trying to make you hang on until turn 8. And Prowess is a deck that just delivers the turn 3 wins with relative consistency, and Bedlam Reveler will keep you clawing into the long ones, and stuff moves, different decks get better or worse, but up until most recently, and I think I have some ideas to get breathing some life even through this, it's been a deck that's been able to deliver on those fronts.
How do you not get bored of this deck, though? You know, there's a lot of decks that would probably fit that criteria, and I know my attention span would probably shrink over time, but it seems like you have a better attention span, at least for this strategy.
Yeah, I actually tend to get really obsessed with one specific deck. In Legacy around 2011 or 12 or whatever, I played Temur Delver like every week for like 3 or 4 years, and just those tempo strategies. And I very much think that Prowess is a tempo deck, first and foremost, that have these decision trees where the answer is different every time. Like a lot of decks, it's like, all right, my opponent casts Birds of Paradise. I should kill it because that's how you play Magic. That gets pretty boring. But Prowess, like, you don't even kill the bird every time playing this deck. You know, there's just like a lot of dynamic things, how you turn on your light up the stage, when it's correct to sacrifice your mountains, your horizon lands, when it's correct to shove for 1 damage or 4 damage, and you anywhere in between on a given turn. And there's just a lot of dynamic gameplay that keeps me coming back.
That is awesome. Those are literally like 4 questions I had to ask you about later on when we get a little bit deeper in this, specifically killing a mana dork and kind of when to enable light up the stage and stuff like that. So I think we can definitely dig in a little bit more about that. But top level, what do you think is the best card in this deck?
I mean, there's 2 answers. The most broken card, the card that really is the glue for how you bridge the gap between Monastery Swiftspear and Bedlam Reveler, is Manamorphose. Costs 0, triggers Prowess, fills up your graveyard with instant/sorcery. It's just really messed up. Your most broken turns tend to involve casting multiple Manamorphose. True. But as you might know if you've tried similar strategies in Pioneer, it's hard to play this deck without Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, that's totally true too. For me, sometimes I wonder if this is like just the Monastery Swiftspear deck too in some ways, but I guess there's a lot of threats that you could sub in, and it's a spells deck, and so you need the spells to be broken in order for it to be good, especially in Modern, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing in Standard. Things have kind of been rotating around. The Phoenix decks in Standard were playable when there were more 1-mana things, and a few things changed with rotation, but right now it's like just Opt is legal for cantrips, and you can't really do a lot with just 1 0 or 1-mana thing. You kind of need a high volume, and they had to be kind of good too.
Do you think Manamorphose is appropriate for Modern's power level?
Is your question whether the card is maybe of dubious legality, maybe fishing for a long-term ban?
It's definitely a card that a lot of people, ourselves included, speculated might eat the ban, especially in the heyday of Visit Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, it's a card that belongs in that conversation. I think that it kind of occupies this space where it enables some things that people like, and things that have been around for a number of years. But now we're living on the world where they even banned Mox Opal, so I would certainly say this card that is really only known for cheating on mana, that's kind of the only thing it does, is maybe not going to be welcome forever.
It'll be a sad day for me, but...
Yeah, I mean, I'd miss it. But I wouldn't. It wouldn't blindside me.
Same. One thing I noticed back in the day, even when Faithless Looting was legal, it seemed like you actually put down the Phoenix version of the deck before that was like popular to do. And even while Faithless was legal, and there was like this brief moment where there was this Prowess deck and this Phoenix, Mono Red Phoenix deck, it almost seemed like you preferred that straight Prowess build.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely did. I thought that I was really onto something cutting the Phoenixes. I had a number of friends who played the Phoenix version, and I think it's really incoherent putting Arclight Phoenix and Light Up the Stage in the same deck. You just raise the volume of cards that you realistically can't use off of your light up cards. I think Arclight Phoenix is a card that is unreasonable to be casting for 4 mana in Modern, especially the Moderns that existed when Faithless Looting was legal. We're talking about eras like Hogak Winter, and just before that, there was plenty of Mox Opal stuff happening. I think that Ironworks was a big deck that really overlapped in kind of the Faithless Looting era, and the Red Phoenix deck did beat up on the Ironworks deck. That certainly is true, but that was true whether you Phoenix or not. Your prowess creatures just kind of killed them before they could get off the ground, and like one artifact destruction spell could bridge the gap if you were a turn slow. But the Arclight Phoenixes, they just were inconsistent at doing the recursive thing. The light up the stage thing just doesn't really work. It really makes things kind of random whether you're playing correctly or not. Like, you kind of have to play as if you're not going to exile a Phoenix, and cast your Lootings as if they might draw a Phoenix, or keep your hands with Phoenix as if you might draw a Looting. You know, the nut draw is going to beat everybody, but that's true of literally every deck, so that's a bad benchmark, bad line to go off of. And the other thing is, as far as Arclight Phoenix decks go, I liked Izzet, I liked Teamer, but a big thing was you could block with your Phoenix, and it would come back later. The Red Phoenix deck just cast all of its spells, and then it was just out. The Phoenixes never came back twice.
Great points. I mean, I feel like I was often blinded by the fact that you could do like 18 damage to someone on turn 2 with the Phoenix deck, but you're right. It ran out of gas as so much more hard than other ones.
Yeah, and now I think that obviously Faithless Looting is not legal, but if we're talking about a format where Force of Negation exists, I'm pretty sure that Mono Red Phoenix loses on the spot if you force a negation of Faithless Looting, which is not true of Mono Red Prowess.
That's interesting.
So we had a question in the notes that we were going to ask next that was, is the Red Prowess deck ever as good without Phoenix as it was with Phoenix? The answer, we're just going to skip that because the answer is yes from Ryan Overturf.
Well, weren't you also playing Faithless Looting, even sans Phoenix?
Yep, Faithless Looting still worked in the deck because you're trying to play 4 Bedlam Revelers. Sometimes you draw 2. Also, Looting's kind of Dark Ritual for Bedlam Reveler. In particular, if you're playing a matchup where your front side of your Lava Dart really isn't worth a mana, you just discard that to the Looting and then it's there later.
So then has the deck, do you think, gotten worse since the banning of Looting, even like the non-Phoenix version?
Yeah, it took a hit. But actually, right after the Looting ban, I spent some time trying to figure out what the deck should look like because I wasn't sure if you could still play 4 Revelers in World Without Looting. Ended up landing on not only could you, but you really should. You realistically can't trim that card if you want to be competitive against the more grindy decks. But once I figured that out, I think that it wasn't until the printing of Oko that any other deck really held a candle to Prowess.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a bad time in Magic history.
It was. Yeah. I was playing 4-color Shadow a lot then, which was like a very bad Oko deck, but still very good just because Oko was very good.
Yeah, they gave you some free ones.
Yeah.
So then what do you think is the current state of Mono Red?
So right now I think Uro is really a beating, and a number of the matchups that you really are hoping to run into, 2 specific ones that showed up a lot during both Hogak Modern and during Oko Modern were Druid Combo and Infect, and I just don't see those decks at all. When those matchups go away, that's a problem. But I think that it's one you can innovate around. I think that the deck really cooled off a bit post-Theros, but I think that there's some iterations you can make to put it back on the map.
Yeah, I remember I felt like I first saw it make a comeback right around the time MTGO introduced the preliminary tournaments. And that's when we started getting these daily results. And for a long time, I feel like for the first couple months of the prelims, we would see Mono Red Prowess decks go 4-1, 5-0 almost every time. And that was when I first kind of woke up and was like, maybe this deck actually still has legs. And that's when we started really seeing 4 Bedlam Reveler was stock. People were really into Crash Through. Sometimes people were playing Steamkin, which I think leads us to the section where we've listed a bunch of red spells. And now we want to ask how you feel about them. Because...
All right, love it.
Because I'll also say this. I've liked Bedlam Reveler, but I've never felt like I've loved it. And there have been times...
It's a card you have to love.
It's a card you have to love.
Your love for it has to be unconditional. Bedlam Reveler is more like your son than your friend. You can't cut it from the deck even when it disappoints you.
That's so interesting. Because there was a time where I was like, I'd just rather play Seasoned Pyromancer. It's always 3 mana. Sometimes it's extra bodies.
Seasoned Pyromancer, that's like your roommate, you know. He'll always buy the beer. But Bedlam Reveler is the only one that can make you proud.
Why is that?
That's amazing.
What does Bedlam do for the deck? Is it just that it lets you hang past turn 8?
Yeah, it's really the only card that generates... Like, drawing 3 cards is something that, assuming the battlefield is relatively even, is going to overpower most matchups, as long as the game is still progressing. And then being a 3/4 with prowess and a deck that's playing Crash Through, it actually just pays off in a much bigger way. Seasoned Pyromancer can block out of some situations, but you never block your opponent to death. Bedlam Reveler is much better at crossing the finish line.
So then Seasoned Pyromancer, would you even say, basically doesn't belong in the deck right now?
Yeah, I wouldn't touch Seasoned Pyromancer. It's defensible as a sideboard card, but in general, the matchups you bring it in for, I think that a lot of players would do well to study diversifying their play patterns in those matchups, because I've personally felt like Jund is an even to favorable matchup for Prowess, and that's a matchup that I hear a lot of players saying, I can't beat Jund, and it's like, well, maybe you're not being as critical of where you're supposed to point your lightning bolts. I think a big thing for me against Jund is sometimes you're supposed to just let them activate the Liana. Just like do the math on when Lightning Bolt is still lethal and they have to discard 2 cards when you have like an extra land to discard. And there's a lot of interesting and cool micro decisions that I think that if you just make a little better, you find yourself winning the matchup more than you're losing it. And at that point, then you don't need to use sideboard space on kind of clunky stuff that doesn't really win games.
Yeah, I will say I recently tried to play a Hollow One deck in Pioneer that had 4 Ox of Vagonis in it, and I kept playing that card and just being like, the Bedlam Reveler effect is so good. Mm-hmm. It's so good that it made me want to go back and start playing it in Modern and go back to Mono Red Prowess in Modern, just because I was like, even just that enters the battlefield effect does so much for you, even in a deck that doesn't really synergize with the discard part of it all that much at this point. It's such a powerful thing to do, to have that be the last card that you play, draw 3 cards, probably get 4 to 6 damage just off of 3 cards that you draw, and then kind of go to town from there. Not to mention that it's a big threat too if you manage to crash through with it or something like that.
Yeah, Ox is messed up. I think that if looting was still legal, you might mess around with a small number of Ox in the Prowess deck.
Yeah, I had a lot of high hopes for that card, and I feel like it's just not the right environment for it to do what it needs to do other than in Dredge, as far as Modern goes anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But, all right, so next controversy we want to talk about a little bit. I feel like this is one that really was something that confused me a little bit about this era of Prowess, and that is Kiln Fiend versus Runaway Steamkin. And I know you have some strong feelings about this.
I've actually...
We're not partisans on this discussion. We're here to hear your thoughts for sure. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I've actually soured a lot on any 2-mana creature. The thing is that your 1-mana creatures, they die to removal. That's fine. Removal all costs at least 1 mana, so that's just an even exchange. You're leaning on Bedlam Reveler for that point, but when you cast a threat and it just dies, if it takes your full turn, and we're talking about a format where games often end on the 3rd or 4th turn, that's 33%, that's 25% of an entire game. So that's actually a steep cost to have your 2-mana creature just tagged. So what your card has to do to be worth that kind of risk has to be pretty powerful. For Kiln Fiend, it's going to often be the case that if you untap with Kiln Fiend, you will just win the game. And in fact, I went to bat for and experimented with just having Kiln Fiends even in the sideboard as part of the plan against Dredge, but right now all the Dredge players have multiple Lightning Axes in their sideboard, and they're not trimming on Conflagrates, and if you spend your turn doing that and your Kiln Fiend just dies right away, then they get an extra turn of dredging, and that means an extra turn of looks at Creeping Chills, and that means it's probably going to take you another turn to kill them because they just gained life for free for no reason. There's a lot of cascading ways the game gets worse for you every turn that you tack onto it. Steamkin doesn't provide any resource that you were ever at any risk of running out of. This card doesn't close the game on turn 3 unless you are just chaining Light Up the Stages or building up a chain all the way to Bedlam Reveler, at which point you're only losing to just dying, and if you have a bunch of spells that you're casting, what are you just dying to? Like, what is the Steamkin actually ever accomplishing? Like, you can literally cast it and literally win a game, but it's almost never because Steamkin was there. He's just at the party. He doesn't do anything. It's like, yeah, you resolve 2 Bedlam Revelers. Of course you won. It doesn't matter if it takes 3 more turns. You're still going to win.
So then what about Kiln Fiend? Because Kiln Fiend is the aggressive creature, right?
Yeah, I just had a few too many, collective brutality. You can tiptoe around that a little bit with your 1/2 prowess creatures, just leave up a spell, but Kiln Fiend's just always there to die.
It really is. It's so the league I played last night, I ran 3 Kiln Fiends in it, and every time I played it, I was like, this card is just not gonna get there, and it is the worst top deck. It's just the worst top deck when you're on turn 5 and you're like, I need something here, I need a lightning bolt here. I mean, whatever, and then you top deck Kiln Fiend, you're like, cool, their removal is back on. Right. Now I guess they get to lightning bolt this or whatever, and then there's nothing quite like the exquisite pain of attacking with a Kiln Fiend and a Monastery Swift Spear after casting 3 spells and then having the Kiln Fiend get Fatal Push, which is just I mean, that's living Magic in Modern, but it's just, it feels so much worse.
Yeah, it's a free roll if you have a Kiln Fiend and you cast some Manamorphoses and they use a removal spell. It's like, okay, well, my spells were free. Right. I cast another threat. But if you just have 2 Lava Darts in your hand and your opponent has open mana, are you supposed to go for lethal? How much damage are you going to do? Because if it's not lethal, then they're just still playing the game and you just have 2 damage left over and they're at 7. So they're still just casting threats. Maybe it's a deck that has 1 toughness creatures too. This was a real cost of firing off your Lava Darts, and it's a real stressful card to play with, and the downside I think ends up outweighing the upside.
Do you think that the deck, okay, so this is maybe getting into some of the innovation area that you're thinking about right now, Danny, which if you want to keep that in the lab for a little bit, I totally understand. But so are you thinking about, so you said you're down on 2 drops totally. Are you thinking about other ways to increase threat density in the deck, or you think you're thinking about other ways to build the deck going forward that better utilizes the threats that are already there?
Yeah, better utilizing the threats that are already there. I mean, generally, it's been a 12 threat deck for me. It's 8 1/2 prowess creatures for 1 and 4 Bedlam Revelers, and that's been a consistent recipe for success if you can figure out the other spells. You're not cutting your Crash Shrews, you're not cutting your Manamorphose, you're not cutting your Lightning Bolt. As much as I've tried, you're not cutting your Lava Spikes. You're not cutting your Lava Darts. But my plan right now is just to make the deck a little bit more focused on maximizing the existing threats. I see you have Blister Coil Weird on your list. That's another one that I've tried. That one's a little bit better than the 2 drops in some respects, in that it always trades even on mana. At a minimum, it trades even on mana with the Fatal Push. But it's harder to protect from a Lightning Bolt. It takes fully 3 spells, where casting a Lava Dart and flashing it back to block against a Lightning Bolt is just a pretty common play for this deck. Blister Coil Weird still just dies if you have that, which is pretty frustrating because your burn spell only deals 2 damage and it costs you a mountain to cast. That's a real cost. The one interaction I really like is Blister Coil Weird against Cryptic Command. But that's such a small percentage of the format that it doesn't really come up too much.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where you're like, this is how I get to sneak by you control player. But yeah,
there's going to Supreme Verdict you anyway. So what does it really matter?
Yeah, they're going to Path to Exile you or whatever too. Yeah,
I have seen some people occasionally bring in Young Pyromancer, and maybe that was a little bit more of a Oko era thing when you needed to make a bunch of bodies that you don't mind turning into elk. But what's your experience with Young Peasy?
Well, I guess first I'll just address the Oko thing. I think with Oko, you either kill Oko the turn it comes down or the game is over. I think if your opponent activates Oko so much as twice, no matter what deck you're playing, the game has ended. I think that was broadly true. So even though I thought Lava Spike was pretty bad against Oko, I left it in to try to Lava Spike down Okos with whatever threat I had left over when it showed up. Young Pyromancer is something that is clearly trying to play a value game, but the problem is there's nothing that it does that makes it resilient to literally any removal spell. And my only experience, the only time I've seen it was playing a mirror match, and you had better have a plan to board that out against the Lava Dart deck, let me tell you.
For sure.
So then I want to talk a little bit about the spells that have come in since Faithless Looting, because there has been a little bit of a rotation. At one point, even Ren and 6 made the cut. So it seems like Crash Through is stock at this point.
Yeah, I think that people really came around on Crash Through. This deck... So when I build decks, I don't just like sit down and say, I think these cards would go in a deck. I mean, I guess I do that, but I do that 7 or 8 times, and then enough of the individual elements for those decks come together and like, okay, now I have built a good deck now that I've failed a dozen times. And Crash Through was a holdover from a really bizarre abomination when I tried to hybridize Arclight Phoenix and Death Shadow. I wanted to give Death Shadow trample, and I wanted red instants and sorceries that replaced themselves. And Crash Through in that deck was giving me the ability to punch over protection from black or protection from red creatures or whatever, and that remains true in Prowess. When I first built the Prowess deck, I was sideboarding this card out sometimes, and in my experience, that is close to never correct. This card just gives you velocity, pumping your Prowess creatures for the card that replaces itself, gasses up your Bedlam Revelers, and then just a lot of people try to get you with pro-red creatures, and I love just smushing them anyway with Crash Through.
Yeah. This definitely was a card when I saw this start showing up, I was like, really? Crash Through? I mean, you know, one mana draw cards are unilaterally like powerful, I think, in a lot of ways, just because they're like waving little flags that say, if you get me in the right shell, I can be abused, you know? And so the trample totally makes sense after you feel what it's like to get your, your Swift Spear stonewalled, basically. And this is something that just lets you go right over it for basically no cost. The one question I have about Crash Through, just like tactically, is are you ever just like cycling this off to try to get to a better draw early in the game, or cycling it off early just to get an extra point of damage and increase the velocity of your deck? Or are you trying to, I mean, I'm sure everything is situational, but it's kind of like trying to figure out sometimes when I play it, do I just fire this off on turn 2 when I'm for essentially no value other than drawing a card?
If human beings kept stat books on completely inane things, I would have the world record for turn 1 Crash Throughs. And it would not be close. It would not be remotely close. You just keep hands that have redraws and a couple interactive spells, especially if you already have the Bedlam Reveler, and you just try to get the Bedlam Reveler castable as quickly as possible, and cycling Crash Through is one of your most effective ways to do that.
Wow, this really tails well with one of my other questions about like heuristics for playing this deck. So are you telling me you keep hands that don't have 1-drop threats?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The thing about that is, a number of people ask me this question. Prowess is not a deck that mulligans very well.
I totally agree, which had a lot of conflict between those two thoughts, right?
And if you mulligan because you want a turn 1 threat in the dark, and you say turn 1 Soulscar Mage, and you have a hand that's good because if the Soulscar Mage connects, you have a light up the stage, and your opponent's just like Swamp Fatal Push, the game's just over sometimes. You can't really mulligan to hope that that is good.
Yeah. And so are you keeping threats sometimes, like you said, like Lightning Bolt, Lava Dart, land, and a couple of Crash Throughs, and you're kind of like, I have no threats, but I have a removal spell that I can use, and I also have a couple of cyclers to draw into a threat to set me up for Bedlam Reveler? Or do you feel like you need some kind of game plan off the top that involves an endpoint with a threat?
I think that as long as a hand has some number of redraws, some kind of cantripic effect, you can be a little bit more generous in what you keep. A hand without threats that I would not keep is like mountain for burn spells.
Sure.
Because you're not a burn spell. You're not a burn deck. You can keep 4 lava spikes and never deal 20 damage. You could play a 5 or 6 turn games, keeping a hand that's 3 mountains and 4 lava spikes, and never be able to deal lethal damage.
Yeah. Totally makes sense. Does Light Up the Stage count as a redraw for you?
Depends what is turning it on and what I need to hit, but generally, yes. Okay. I am not shy about lava darting my opponent to turn on Light Up the Stage.
Yeah. How often are you playing Warlord's Fury?
So that's actually the current idea I have for the deck. So the flex slot that I think has gotten very bad, I mentioned earlier that Druid combo and in fact seem to be on a serious downswing. And I'm really just not into Burst Lightning, Wild Slash, Shock, whatever variant you're playing. I have had that card in my hand and come up just a little bit short against Uro just too many times. And I think I'm just going to keep playing the Mishra's Bauble build and play 2 Warlord's Fury.
Yeah, so fully 10 kind of cantrips plus 4 Light Up the Stage, so 14 cards that draw.
And Manamorphose as well.
Oh, and Manamorphose, yeah, totally forgot about the broken one. So, yeah. Yeah.
Have you experimented with Bone Crusher Giant?
I have. I think that it's just firmly a sideboard card. I started with 2 in the main. Patrick Sullivan's actually pretty big on Bone Crusher Giant. We kind of maintained some conversation around the deck. Obviously, he's really into Lava Spikes and Lightning Bolts, so kind of a common interest there. And he's pretty big on Bone Crusher Giant, and I found that drawing 2 in game 1 in too many matchups was too much of a liability. So I trimmed it down to 1, tried that for a while, but if my position is that I think that Wild Slash or Burst Lightning isn't good, Bone Crusher Giant is just the same card that costs twice as much in a lot of your games. So I like it as a sideboard card. I think it's very good in all of the red mirrors. And I do think it carries its weight against a deck like Jund, where it can, tase a Bloodbraid Elf and then be a card that demands an answer. And sometimes you just get extra damage, as long as it's not getting checked by Tarmogoyf, then it's like shocking your opponent or eating some loyalty from a Liliana. So I do like it in those matchups as well, but I like it as a sideboard card. And that's where I would put in my sideboard if I was interested in a card like Season's Pyromancer. I think Bone Crusher just does it better.
Yeah, you kind of know what you're getting in the 2-for-1 with Bone Crusher. You can plan around it a little better than with Pyromancer, where sometimes you're not going to get the tokens, sometimes you're going to draw air. So
yeah, and if you like, there's the problem with Bedlam Reveler where you draw 2 or like God forbid 3 or 4, but Seasoned Pyromancer just adds another card where you can't get rid of all of them. Like they're going to be discarding the others to the other copy.
And then I imagine the same feelings you have towards Burst Lightning and Shock, etc., is probably where you stand on Firebolt.
Yeah, Firebolt, I actually never really understood this one because flashing it back for 5 to deal 2 damage seems very weak. I've had multiple people tell me that they're really into flashing back Firebolt, and I'm just like, did you play this deck in a booster draft, or what's going on where you're really big on that effect? But being an instant is so important in this deck. Anytime you're playing any matchup that's about creatures engaging in combat or lightning bolts, like damage-based effects, being able to cast spells at instant speed is just of paramount importance.
So are you, at this point, do you think just like categories of sideboard cards, sometimes this deck runs like Leyline of the Void, sometimes it runs Tormod's Crypt. Are you kind of like more... I mean, the metagame is not so broken that everybody's running Leyline right now, so are you kind of more in the Tormod's Crypt kind of zone if we were running Graveyard Hate than anything else?
I actually swear by Surgical Extraction.
Okay.
It's a little bit weaker in terms of the ceiling of hate it provides. However, it naturally fits in the deck. It's an instant speed, pump spell. It counts for juicing your Bedlam Reveler.
It's free.
It's free, and I don't know how much you've queued into Dredge, but they always bring in Artifact Hate. They just always do it. So Crypt, they're just sometimes just going to punk you with an Ancient Grudge, and your Crypt's not going to do anything, where Surgical is going to be weaker, but it's going to do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, it's maybe a little better against Uro right now, which I feel like is one of the major stumbling blocks of the deck at the moment. So that makes sense.
I haven't figured out sideboarding in all of the Uro matches because the thing is too that Uro means any number of like 5 different Uro decks or something.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, right. Yeah, not saying that is a good thing.
Right.
But I think I like one or two surgicals in most of the Euro matchups.
Yeah.
How about Blood Moon versus Alpine Moon?
Alpine Moon is one that I was big on before Field of the Dead was printed. But now I'm just kind of off of both of them. I'm just trying to win any match where you would want that effect on turn 3. That's actually where I'm at. Because Dryad of the Elegian Grove is such a problem. And all these decks have gotten a little bit wiser about engaging with Prowess. Your Tron opponent's bringing in Dismembers now.
Right.
So they're just going to bridge the gap until they need to pop an Oathstone that way. So I'm just trying to make them actually care about that life that they would otherwise be spending on Dismember.
It makes sense. Do you feel like, I always felt like this had a pretty good matchup against Tron, and I even feel like sometimes it has a pretty good matchup against Titan as well. And because they feel like if it's just kind of feels like it's designed to punish the big mana decks, and then kind of loses a little bit of steam against these decks that have life gain in them, essentially in the mid-range kind of zone. Do you feel like that's where it fits in the metagame? Or
yeah, I think that generally the big mana matchups are pretty positive. Dryad of the Legion Grove has the other thing where it's a 4 toughness creature. It does more than one thing that you care about. So the Titan matchups have gotten a little bit worse, but
then I'm bringing in Dismember against them.
There's things you can do, and
fingers crossed.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that's just kind of the point that I was making about playing against the Jund matchup. Is oftentimes when a new card shows up and the matchup feels worse, maybe it just means you need to reevaluate your general approach to it. And Dismember, it kills Sakura Tribe Scout too. It's just fine in that matchup,
Yeah, I popped an Arboreal Grazier with a Dismember on turn 2 yesterday in the matchup that I played, and I was like, this is the right play. I got to do 11 damage because of that, basically. So get it out of there.
It's got to swallow your pride and kill the O3 sometimes.
Right.
So you mentioned early in our conversation that you see this as a tempo deck, which actually is interesting to me. Because I wanted to kind of pick your brain on how you see it compared to traditional Boros Burn. Since I think one of the things that makes it kind of a good deck compared to maybe some Mono Red decks in Pioneer is that you can, in theory, have this burn plan to kind of fall back on, since your 1 mana do still do 3 damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do play a lot of games where over the course of a couple turns you're just trying to peel the last Lava Spike or Lightning Bolt or whatever. You're able to do that. It kind of naturally fits in the way you'd be playing the game, really, in any of your game plans. But the difference between Prowess and Burn is that Burn's going to keep that 3-land 4 Lava Spike hand, and you would be a fool to mulligan it because it is not getting better. Mm-hmm. There's no chance that you mulligan that 7-card hand and it gets better. Prowess is more dynamic in its game plans, and you are able to better play long games because of Bedlam Reveler, assuming you get the right spread of things, which, I've at this point played thousands of matches. You're going to get burned sometimes, but it is consistent at playing the long games, assuming your opponent, doesn't actually beat you before it happens. Whereas Burn, I think that the one strength Burn has over Prowess is you get free wins off of Eidolon of the Great Revel. But in terms of just keeping any hand and having the ability to fight through interaction or play a long game, I think Prowess is much better. And Prowess also, at the same time, and it's weird, but you also just win on turn 3 more often. So it's hard for me to say that Burn is a better deck, but when forced to critically think about it, the nod I give to Burn is that Eidolon is a card that generates some free wins.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, so I think there's a little bit of a conception that sort of Prowess and Burn are opposite ends of a spectrum, sort of, or that, when Burn is good in a metagame, Prowess is a little less good, and when Prowess is better, Burn is a little less good. I kind of feel like that's a false equivalency in a lot of ways. Do you think that that's...
Yeah, I honestly think that Burn has been a mid-tier deck forever. I think maybe Deathrite Shaman Modern was the height of Burn's powers.
Probably.
And Prowess has been in the conversation for top 3 decks basically since its inception. And I don't think there's been any reversal in position between those 2 decks. I do think that Burn is a deck that Prowess really needs to respect in the sideboard. But if you come with the right tools, I like the prowess side of that, and I like the prowess against the field. So it's hard for me to say that burn has really ever felt better than prowess for any point where prowess is a deck you should be playing.
You heard it here first.
Do you think prowess can beat an Uro deck?
Oh, I mean, in absolute terms, yes. It, of course, can happen. I think that getting it to the point where you're favored against an Uro deck, assuming the Uro deck takes note and tries to iterate back, I think that the Uro deck ends up on top at the end of any kind of arms race where you are in direct competition. But that's the beauty of Modern, is you're going to try to get better against Uro, and they are going to play against 70 other decks. So I think that right now, the focus should be on tightening up the matchup, and I think cutting the shocks and just getting a little bit more streamlined is how you do that. And I don't really expect Uro to crack back at you, because even if you tighten up your prowess list, the Uro player is going to queue into some knucklehead playing Steamkin and win very easily and not respect the matchup, and then you'll beat them in a match where it matters.
That's interesting. Is Skullcrack just like one of the solutions to the Uro matchup, or are there other cards that you look toward to do that?
I don't think Skullcrack really can work in the deck. In particular, if we're talking about a deck that's generally not very good at only winning through Lava Spikes, the Uro decks tend to also play Weather the Storm, so it's just like a bunch of different effects that you need to Skullcrack through. I think that you do just try to go for a fast enough one, play your 1-drops, try to thread the needle and Weather the Storm, try to get to the Bedlam Reveler phase of the game in a way where the Bedlam Reveler is still relevant. Don't let them get out of control with a Jace or bringing Uro back. Try to push back on them with Surgical Extraction. And I think you can play the game in a way that is kind of mid-rangey, in a way that they're not going to expect you to be able to. But I think the more you try to play a Skullcrack to play into their game, the more they're going to capitalize on you for that. You just can't leave up that much mana. I think you have to be engaging with them pretty head on.
Yeah, I've tried Skullcrack a couple of times recently, and I felt like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I was like, this is one of those things where I feel like, I even playing this deck frequently over the last year, I was still thinking of it a little bit in the burn paradigm, and it's like, well, Skullcrack's okay in burn, I might as well try it out here, and it's really not.
Yeah,
it's really not helping you.
There's the hyper-focused, my opponent gains 6 life, and now I'm losing the game. And wouldn't it be great if their life total was 6 lower?
Right.
But then there's the broader picture where it's like, I did not have the time to leave up 2 mana, A. B, if I did, they would have just done something else. Right. And C, this is just not very good in my deck. And I think that you have to do something with a little bit more finesse. And I like this slightly heavier cantrip version. Because in these matchups, I think that Lava Spike is pretty bad against the Uro decks. Obviously, if you Lava Spike them and then the Uro, what did you accomplish? And Skullcrack is a little bit more of the same to a different extent, but kind of similar play patterns there. And I think that your Crash Throughs and your 2 Warlord's Fury is what I'm going to be starting with, are just generally going to be better to cast than Lava Spike because they net you damage and replace themselves. It's less damage, but you will still have cards in your hand, and that's really going to matter against an opponent drawing multiple extra cards a turn.
Absolutely. So I think we've talked about a number of different fallacies in the discussion about the deck, right? Do you have to mull to a 1-drop? Is the deck's only game plan to go fast? Can we even beat an Uro deck? Like, what's the plan about that? Do you feel like is there another big glaring mistake that you think people have as far as when they think about prowess as a deck? I mean, one might be that I don't know if most people would agree with. I think a lot of people would be surprised by the statement that it's been one of the best 3 decks in Modern for the last year, essentially, is kind of what you're saying. I think that's a totally reasonable thing to say. But what do you think are some other fallacies that maybe people have about this deck, or big glaring mistakes that they're making?
I think that the big one is something that we largely touched on, is a lot of people pick up this deck and play it like a burn deck. And I think if you try to do that, you will get burned yourself. I was watching a friend play a match in a PTQ a couple months back, and he was playing this Blue Moon deck, and he played against Prowess, and he cast a turn 2 Thing in the Ice, and the Prowess player just had a Swift Spear, had Lightning Bolt, Lava Dart, and a second land. And I walked away because I was like, oh, Lito's getting destroyed. Like, there's no way that Thing in the Ice is making it a turn, so it's never going to transform. And I walked back, and the Prowess player had a Lava Spike in his graveyard, and it was still turn 2. It's just like, you have to play this deck to engage in attrition. Right. If you let your opponents have permanents on the battlefield, you just don't have enough burn to just close games that way. Yeah. You have to identify that there are permanents that are problems for you, but you can kill them and still win the game. And a lot of that is leaning on Bedlam Reveler, and you won't always draw it, but you'll draw it often enough. And also, when you need extra cards, sometimes you'll light up the stage, sometimes your Horizon lands, they'll get you enough cards. You know, it won't be the overwhelming beatdown where you just topple over them with Revelers at the end, but you'll get just enough. And approaching the deck that way, where sometimes you have to play the control. In fact, a pretty large percentage of the time you play the control, even in matchups where you wouldn't think it. I find myself playing the control against Jund if I think they can't beat Bedlam Reveler the way the game is going. And you win plenty of games that way, even though they clearly are the pound for pound more powerful individual card quality deck. You know, 1-2 is a lot weaker than Tarmogoyf in most situations. But sometimes you can wear them down.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Are you ever siding out Bedlam Reveler? Especially like if you see maybe Graveyard Hate in game 2?
There are times it's really a high context. I was siding out in Hogak Modern against Hogak, but I actually ended up reevaluating that once I got on the 4 surgical plan, because if you surgical them twice, then the game does last long enough where you want to draw that card. And even when they're a little bit turned off, when they're not dredging every turn, they're still putting some power on the table, which means your burn spells can't always go upstairs, at which point you do need to draw the extra cards. And I think that there's very rare situations where you want to board out Bedlam Reveler. I think the big one is I would make sure to trim against Tron. You know, 4 Revelers is never going to be an element of a normal game against Tron that you win.
Yeah. Yeah, my habit has always been to kind of snap take it out against Graveyard Hate, but that maybe is just not the right thing to do just because you might need it.
Yeah, people just don't have that much hate. It kind of depends the form of the hate. Because the thing is, if their hate is Leyline, they're not always going to have it. Sometimes they're mulligan to it. And if they do have a Leyline, if you draw exactly 1 Reveler, you've broken even on cards. You're still that turn 3 deck sometimes. Sometimes they mulligan to a Leyline, and you cast a Soulscar Mage, and you cast 4 spells and the game ends. Like that. Yep. That's just a thing your deck does, you know? You can't play too scared around Graveyard Hate, and sometimes they'll have the Graveyard Hate. You know, what happens if they have Leyline, don't have it in their opener, and then draw it? That's like the best case scenario for you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So that was a lot of Mono Red talk. It was very hot. We do want to ask a couple questions about Magic in general, because we do play other decks. We play some other formats as well. And in general, we were curious, as someone who plays a lot of Magic, streams so frequently, and is in coverage, what do you think about the current state of both Modern and Pioneer?
I feel like Pioneer is in a good spot right now. You know, there's a few decks that are obviously the top decks in the format, but there's not kind of a deck that every week I log in and I play against it 4 times. There's 3 decks that if I go a day and I don't play against Heliod, Inverter, or Sultai, it's going to be weird if I don't queue into any of those. But I'm not playing like the 4 Inverter, 1 Sultai leagues. I'm still playing against a bunch of different stuff. You know, these are easy decks to fall back on. People are going to play them, but they're not dominating the format. And there's pretty good diversity. And the games generally are pretty good. I feel like what I do matters, and it also matters relative to what my opponent does, which is the pinnacle of Magic. That's really what you want out of a game, right?
Yeah. Do you feel good about the fact that there hasn't been a ban to take Inverter down a peg? Like that was the correct decision?
I don't I mean, correct is such a strong word for these circumstances.
Sure.
You know, it's kind of a dweeby thing to say, like, "Ugh, hate's a really strong word," but like,
Yeah.
They're going to ban Dig Through Time eventually. It didn't have to be now, but you wonder when.
I wake up every day wondering that, honestly.
Is it today?
As far as Pioneer. Is it today? I mean, honestly, I don't know if you know about the website the side website that we have that's called mtgbandswhen.com, which is just like, if you want to know when there's a ban coming, go and look at it. Although I didn't update it for the Brawl ban that's coming up because, like, I don't care about that. But I still feel like both Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise are going to go. I don't think they're going to make it a year in the format. And every day I wonder if this is going to be the day. And I know you've done your part to try to make Treasure Cruise get on people's radars.
Yeah, I have a handful of 5.0s with Treasure Cruise, Arclight Phoenix decks, and my interest in that deck waxes and wanes because it's a really stressful deck to play. You know, there's the thing. It's similar to Prowess, where like you have a cruise in your hand, and if you draw strategic planning, your opponent's going to get destroyed, and if you draw a second Treasure Cruise, you're going to feel stupid.
Yeah, Stan and I both definitely sleeved up that deck as soon as Pioneer was announced and have tried to play it a bunch of times as well. So I feel you on that. What's your favorite deck in Pioneer right now?
I actually today I streamed some Nexus mid-range. That deck is something I think is kind of charming, but yesterday I streamed some Mono Red Prowess in Pioneer, and I ended up putting up a 5.0 with a deck that's pretty different from how the modern deck works, but it speaks to my passions and my interests. So I'm pretty hot on that deck right now.
I'm gonna have to go look that up because I think I missed that on Twitter when you because you post up your deck list every time before you're about to stream. I must have missed that one yesterday.
Yep. I
will go look it up because looking for a new deck to try out in Pioneer could be one of my favorite decks from Modern, I guess.
Yeah, it's different, but there's a lot of overlap.
Awesome. And as for Modern, how do you feel about that format right now?
I think Modern's a little bit more of a mess. There's still some leftover noise from Modern Horizons. There's new cards coming in that are kind of heavy-handed in how powerful they are. I don't enjoy playing against Uro. I don't enjoy playing against Dryad of the Elysian Grove, but at this point, you know, I haven't reached the volume of playing against these decks, or maybe the requisite specific negative experience where I feel like these are dramatically worse than other things. At the end of the day, I'm still registering Manamorphose. You know, I'm still getting away with one myself.
Well, you have to, right? If you want to keep up with Modern,
true.
you have to do at least one broken thing.
Yeah, if there's no chance that your Modern deck will get banned, that sounds like you're probably not taking the tournament serious enough to win it, you know?
Yep.
But Modern, I think, is about as good as it ever is. You know, a lot of people have in their heart of hearts, in their mind's eye, an idea of the Gilded Age of Modern, and all of those formats suck. Splinter Twin Modern sucked. I love Treasure Cruise Modern. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was just a disaster. You know, the Modern format that you liked wasn't any good either. They're all just fine.
Yeah. I think that people forget how short the Treasure Cruise Modern was and how much because there was a pro tour during that, I think, or some high level play. And I remember, I think Patrick Chapin talked about it and was like, yeah, there were, of the top 12 tables, it was like 20 blue-red Delver decks with Treasure Cruise in them. And that is not good.
No.
You know, Birthing Pod, sorry, that was not good. But I still think it's fun. You know, I also think that the diversity of decks that I'm facing online right now is pretty good. Like you said, it's not like you're facing Uro all the time, and I still get annoyed with Dredge, even though there's no reason for Dredge to be super great right now, but it's still out there being a good deck. You know, last night the league I played in, like I may have mentioned, I played against Tron twice and Titan, and that was fine to play against Mono Green Tron twice. It was like, I haven't seen this deck in a while, and I played against it in round 1 and round 2.
Yeah. Yeah, Green Tron is like weirdly one of the good guys now. You know, what does it even beat anymore? Green Tron shows up and you're like, oh, how quaint. Like,
Probably John.
7 mana, whatever.
I got a little scared. So I lost one of the games against a turn 4 Ulamog. So I was like, God, I do not want to lose a match against Green Tron. And I was playing a Bauble build of Prowess last night, and I took a look at their deck with the Bauble and was like, their top card was a Wormcoil Engine. And I was like, sweet, I'm probably going to die right now. And then they chose to play a different card on their fourth turn, and then I just ran them over.
Nice.
So, yeah. But I was definitely like, boy, if this goes, I'm going to be done for.
I almost think that Modern kind of sucking all the time is the appeal. At least it is for me. Like, I just love that I have an outlet for this broken shenanigans every once in a while.
Well, there's an important element of Magic that I think it's hard to have an appreciation for, specifically when you are in the loser's bracket, but it's very important that Magic is kind of egalitarian. This is something that came up on my stream today. People were comparing Hogak to Caw-Blade, and like, you know what the big difference is? Hogak's not worse than Caw-Blade. Caw-Blade's worse than Hogak because bad players couldn't ever win a tournament during Caw-Blade. It is imperative that bad players can win tournaments. That's one of the best things about Magic. And Modern delivers.
High variance, right? Like, people can enjoy high variance. I think that makes a ton of sense.
So as a player, do you set goals for yourself?
Yes and no. I'm not a particularly goal-oriented person, and I actually, this year, I'm dealing with more expectation management than goals necessarily. Just to cruise over my last year, I'm not trying to highlight this as a braggadocious way, but I played like 5 tournaments and I won an Open and top 4 at a Grand Prix. But then I played the Mythic Championship and it was MC Oko, and that was horrible. I lost every round. I had no interest in the format. And you just have to realize that, like, those are the swings with competitive Magic. So this year, my goal was actually not to fly to play into any tournament that I paid for out of pocket. Not to chase that. Not to chase the highs, to be aware of the lows and, like, accept success as it is accessible to me.
Good news, you'll never have to fly again.
Yeah, I'm doing a great job this year.
The whole world is doing a great job right now.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of the world ending, it seems like, and I think this is probably empirically true, because so many people are under quarantine internationally, there's just a flood of players on Arena and Magic Online. And something that I've been thinking about lately, especially while paying attention to tournament results, be it challenges or super qualifiers or prelims, is whether or not it's affecting the rate of innovation in formats. And I think you probably still play Magic more than I do. To be honest, I don't get to play it every day. Do you think people are still innovating in this digital-only space of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's conventional wisdom, or generally accepted as fact, that Magic Online just moves faster than paper Magic. There's some corollaries to this. For example, the biggest innovations tend to happen around Pro Tours. And that has to do with a couple factors. People highlight the fact that it's the best players in the game, but it's also hundreds of players taking a week off of work to do nothing but Magic. And it helps that they're the best players in the game, but it's also just more time than anybody spends on it. So you said, take somebody with an aptitude, give them time. Of course, the Pro Tour is going to see a lot of innovation. But Magic Online, like when people only play Magic Online, you were asking like how I play Prowess all the time. Like, people don't play the same deck constantly. People try new things and new things start working. I think in the last 3 weeks, I've started seeing all of the blue-black decks start playing Ashiok Nightmare Muse. That wasn't true a month ago. And that card is just really good. And that's not the only innovation happening. The Heliod deck is becoming really focused on what it does, and they're all playing Gideon's Intervention now, and they all have Elspeth Conquers Death in the 75. They have decided to really lean in on the Arcanist Owl package, and that was something that was kind of contentious a little bit ago. And these are not the only decks that are changing. You know, I'm trying to do my part. Like I mentioned, I'm trying to make Mono Red Prowess work in Pioneer, and combination of aptitude, boredom, and time. That's going to move the needle, absolutely.
Some of the good news about the moment we're in is that we just got a bunch of new cards introduced to us. And we're recording this the Thursday before the full set is spoiled. So at this point, we've seen most of Ikoria cards. Is there anything that stood out to you for either modern or Pioneer versions of Mono Red?
I don't think I've seen anything that really looks like a Mono Red contender. this is a wedge set after all. There's a lot of multicolor stuff happening. I usually wait until other people try things or until we see the full spoiler before I really go to work. Periodically, there's a card that really gets me thinking. For this set, that card is Sprite Dragon. Obviously, it's not a Mono Red card, but that's one I intend to work on in Pioneer, Modern, Standard. If I have enough free time, Legacy. I'm going to play a lot of Sprite Dragons.
You think Legacy even for that card? That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I have not enjoyed playing Legacy for some time, but Blue-Red Delver eschewing a third color to play some basics is something that I've been interested in for a long time, and Dreadhorde Arcanist does not satisfy me. This card is way more my speed, because I think that this card is actually kind of close to Tarmogoyf, but it also pitches the Force of Will, which
that's awesome.
Which I really like.
I mean, definitely that's one of my favorite cards in the set so far too. That's sweet to hear. I mean, the anything that gets +1/+1 counters with non-creature spells or instants and sorceries, sign me up.
Oh yeah.
What do you think about the Tri-lands? You're the first person I get to ask about this.
I can't believe they did Frontier Bivouac like that. You know? I have literally registered Frontier Bivouac in Pioneer, and I was happy about it. People are playing Opulent Palace and Sultai, and
yeah,
I actually said in a broadcast one time I really want Crumbling Necropolis in Pioneer. That's actually the thing that I'm miffed most about is allied mana is still pretty bad in Pioneer, and these are enemy color wedge lands, but they're cool designs. They'll see a lot of play. They're really heavy-handed in their effectiveness, so it's like not surprising. It's a little hard for me to get too excited about something that is obviously good and does a very specific thing, and that thing is enable you to cast spells.
Right.
It's going to go in a deck that's a little bit slower, and it plays at least 3 colors. So what that means is kind of a mid-range soup kind of thing. I don't get out of bed every morning to cast Niv Mizzet Reborn. That I'm just not that person. So Tri-lands don't move the needle as much for me there. But I can see why these lands are exciting. I think specifically Commander players should be most excited about these. Just fetchable Tri-lands is going to be really nice for that format, and just more lands with cycling so you keep your spells flowing. But I don't know. They're cool. I don't sound like I'm giving them a too strong of an endorsement, and I'm not trying to beat up on them or anything. They are cool.
I mean, you acknowledge that they were powerful. You just said they're not exciting to me, and I think that's totally fair. It's not, they're lands, and they're not particularly splashy ones in thematically or anything. They're just super powerful.
Yeah, they're no Fiery Island.
As a Legacy player, are there any pre-modern cards that you would actually like to see reprinted either into Standard or into something like Modern Horizons 2 to introduce them to either versions of the Mono Red deck?
Probably nothing that would be good for any format. There's probably a number of listeners that specifically like the idea of some cards that are obviously powerful or obviously well-known or iconic. There's the we want Counterspell in Modern crowd and the we want Lightning Bolt in Pioneer crowd, and I'm against that. I want Werebear in Pioneer. That's what I'm about. Give me Standstill in Standard.
I love that.
What about Red Elemental Blast? Too strong?
Oh yeah, I would go for Reb in Modern. Yeah, give me Red Elemental Blast in Modern. You got me.
I mean, it's called Veil of Summer, I heard.
Oh yeah. It's already there.
We already have it. Yeah. I guess the last thing I would ask you is, you have a different perspective than a lot of people that we get to talk to because you're involved heavily, you're part owner of a game store, like you said. What do you think is the most popular format at your store generally before we kind of went into the quarantine time?
Things are in flux right now. There's been a lot of migration to Pioneer. So right now I think it's Pioneer, but it's still so fresh. We had Legacy players interested in Pioneer, Modern players interested in Pioneer, the Standard players who've been playing for a few years and never sold anything, who are really excited that their quarters are now $5 bills.
Totally.
There's a lot of reasons to move to Pioneer right now, but it's still so new that, I mean, it's the answer to the question, I guess, but
right.
It's not obvious what level of permanence that will have.
Yeah. What was that exercise like for you all at the store, having to go through backstock to find new Pioneer staples? Was that like a multi-week sorting exercise that everybody had to pitch in on?
So there's some stuff that had to come out of the storage locker, but our sorting methodology is a lot different from most. I know when you go to a lot of game stores, you're like, I need a copy of Stifle. It's from Scourge. We don't sort by sets. We just sort by cards that are potentially good or desirable, and cards that ended up seeing play in Pioneer more or less fit that parameter. Mm-hmm. And the guy that does the most of our sorting, he was aware of where there was a pile of Inverter of Truth. So, we were ready to go on that. They weren't too hard for us to track down.
Does being a store owner impact you as a player at all?
Probably. It's difficult for me to see that one from the outside. I definitely don't care at all about card availability, but at the same time, I'm such a stubborn person that I only register Mountain and Steam Vents anyway. So that's realistically just not a problem for me. It takes a lot of your time. I know that for some of my business partners, like, getting engaged in Magic as a game you play for fun is something that loses appeal. The more you get professionally involved, the more it feels like work. The more that the people you engage with are people that you engage with as in a customer service role, it's a lot harder to face them just walking around in your street clothes. You have to maintain that professionalism. You feel that pressure there, so you're a little bit more uncomfortable in those tournament environments, but that's already true for commentary. And I don't know, I'm a little bit of a brash person, but I kind of had that reputation before anyway, so it didn't really appreciably impact my behavior.
Once upon a time, we had Ross Merriam on the show, and something he said that has stuck with me for months now is that when your hobby becomes your job, it stops being your hobby. Because then it's just like you're no longer doing this thing for fun, because you have to do it for work. And
I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, in terms of enjoying the game as a hobby and a passion and engaging with it professionally, it is very important and fortunate for me that I both have very knowledgeable and very trustworthy business partners, and our business is sustaining in a way where I don't have to be behind the counter at the store. If you open up a business and you only have so much starting inventory, or you're really limited on starting capital, that means you're going to have to be there 5 or more days a week, maybe working 80-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks in some cases, like some absurd amount of work. You're not going to do that for fun. No way, not a chance. Nobody is capable of that. You're eating and you're sleeping and you're at work. That's it. And the few waking moments you have away from that, you want to do anything else. You will go home to your partner and you'll say, talk to me about anything that is not Magic. Or don't talk at all. That's fine too.
What did Tom Nook try to sell you today? Tell me about that.
All right, Ryan, where can people find you? What would you like to promote to our listeners who might not know you?
Yeah, I mean, check me out on Twitter at Ryan Overdrive. Assuming that live tournaments start happening at some point ever, and the SCG Tour is a part of that, you can find me broadcasting for the SCG Tour. Currently, I stream on my Twitch page, also at Ryan Overdrive, the cross-branding. You guys get it. But that's where you can find me right now.
And then Lodestone.
Yeah, Lodestone Coffee and Games. Our website's just lodestonecoffeeandgames.com. We are in open beta for our online Magic singles sale. So if you're in the United States, check us out. Obviously, there's some stay-at-home orders in a lot of states. I guess not every state has that. So Minnesota, we have it. So our doors are not open right now, but our website is running. So any business you can send our way, we'd greatly appreciate that.
Awesome. But we will go and check out your website, definitely. And if you're in the Twin Cities and you haven't checked out Lodestone, go check out Ryan's store. I will go check out the website. I'm always looking for a new... I don't go out and play paper that much. I stay in my house. That's my brand. But I definitely buy singles still, so I will check out your site as well, Ryan.
Dave, come on, let's do a little road trip. It's only an 8-hour drive.
You know what? I got some great friends in Minneapolis. I would love to come up there. Weirdly, the number of times I have been to Minnesota, it has been only to go to St. Cloud for press checks for a project that I used to work on with a big printer out there. And so I would land in Minneapolis and go straight to St. Cloud, which is a bit of a drive, smaller city, but cool place nonetheless.
All right, man. Thanks again. It was really nice chatting with you. Hopefully one day I'll get to bump your elbow. We're never shaking hands again.
Yeah, well, if you ever make it out, we'll be there. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll put all the links to your online presence and Lodestone into the show notes for this episode as well. That wraps up this bonus episode of The Dive Down. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our show so you get the latest episodes, bonus and otherwise, as soon as they come out. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can email thedivedown@gmail.com or tweet us at thedivedown, all one word. Ask us about Modern or Pioneer or Mono Red Prowess, even though Ryan is probably the expert in those questions. If you'd like to support the show, you can check us out at patreon.com/thedivedown or use our promo code at ManaTraders to get 15% off your first 3 months of ManaTraders online rental service. Promo code TheDiveDown, all one word. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music, and of course, Ryan Overturf for being a guest on this episode. And until next week, stay inside and cast red spells.